Welcome to Taking Off with the Gary Chicago Airport Show. I'm your host, Pastor Marion J. Johnson, Jr. Our very special guest today is Mr. Tim Touhy. Great young man, has a lot of insight, and he's helping us develop the airport into what it should be. And Tim, we're just so glad to have you today.
A pleasure to be here, Pastor. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. So let us know something about your background, where you're from, and how did you get to Gary? And
sure, absolutely.
And tell us those kind of things. We want to know something about your background first.
Sure.
So.
I was born and raised in Chicago,
okay.
On the south side. And I spent many summers growing up as a young man coming here to the Northwest Indiana for the dunes and enjoying everything that this area has to offer. Went to school also in the Chicago area, went to college at Loyola University, and got involved with the project that we're working on right now at the Gary Chicago International Airport in the public relations aspect. I'm with a firm called Hawthorne Strategy Group, and we are a public relations firm based in Chicago. And our principal founder, Gene Reineke, is a resident of Northwest Indiana. He lives in Valparaiso.
Okay, so you have connections with the Indiana area, and that's good. That's good to know.
Absolutely.
So tell us something about Hawthorne and some of the projects that they have had before, and what is your main focus, or what is it that you guys are trying to achieve at the Gary Chicago Airport?
Sure. Hawthorne Strategy Group, as I said, is based in Chicago. And we have clients mainly in the Midwest, but some throughout the U.S. as well. So we're a public relations firm and what's also called a public affairs firm, that nexus between where public relations and community relations and government relations mix. So that's really our expertise. We got involved with the Gary Chicago Airport as the Airport Authority Board was beginning the process to look at a public-private partnership for the airport. So our role there really is to come in and help be the communications arm for that particular project, working not only within the community of Gary, but also within the Northwest Indiana region.
Okay, I happen to be on that committee with you, and I want to commend you for your very fine work.
Thank you.
Explain to our listening audience, or our viewing audience in this case, explain to them what's the difference between community relations and marketing.
Yeah, great question. When we think about that and look at it, it's really an integrated approach, okay? So, for instance, if you're marketing a product, you're finding various ways to connect with those potential consumers who want the product, okay? When we're also working in a community relations environment, we're not only talking about what's happening, but we're listening. We're trying to find out from the community what questions that they have, what misperceptions they may have, and how we can help educate. But then also learning from the community about how we can even make our communications effort more robust. So I think that's a key thing there. And so we're working with groups like churches, and business groups, even some of the tourist groups within the Northwest Indiana region. As people read about and hear about what's happening at the airport, all these avenues give us a chance to tell the story about what's happening and what they can expect going forward. Okay,
with the Visitors Bureau, what is your role with the Visitors Bureaus around our community?
Sure, it's a great example. So one of the things we're doing and working with the marketing team at the Gary Chicago Airport is to get out to numerous groups. Think about it in terms of anybody that has a stake in the development and the long-term viability of the airport and the area around the airport. So one of those groups that we'd likely go out to would be visitors bureaus. Others would be business groups. So we're talking with the Gary Chamber. We've had meetings with the Crossroads Chamber in Lake County, and we've also met with regional groups sort of throughout Northwest Indiana. This is very important because they're going to read about in the newspaper what's happening at the airport, but we just don't want to leave it up to the media to help us tell that story. We want to go direct to the people.
Okay. And so you are available if there was a community group that wanted to get some insight on what the P3 is and what's the process in setting up the P3 and how that would affect the operations of the airport. Are you free to come out and possible to have somebody out of your group come out and speak to the people?
Absolutely. In fact, we're not only actively ourselves trying to find groups to go to, but we're happy to come out and speak with any group that might reach us. You raise a good point here. One of the things that the P3 committee that you're on set out for itself as a goal from the very beginning is to be as open and transparent with this process as it can be. So each one of the P3 committee meetings has been held as a public session.
Yes.
So that's been very important. And we also have each one of our documents that the P3 group works with is available on the website for the Gary Chicago Airport. So having an open and transparent process is really, really key to what we're doing. And again, I just want to underscore, it's going out to the community and helping educate the community about what a public-private partnership is, and then also listen to what the questions that they have, and they've had very, very good questions for us. The type of questions that we would expect. What does this mean to me? How does this help with jobs? What does this look like for the future at Gary? And these are the kinds of questions we would expect, but going to a community group and being able to answer those face-to-face has been a really important asset for us.
Okay, Tim, how does Hawthorne, have they had any experience with the P3? And give us a definition for our viewers, just exactly what is a P3. I know, but we want our viewing audience to know, to get the understanding of what a P3 is and how does it work.
Sure. Well, let's start there.
Okay.
What is a P3? That's really sort of the Communications 101 aspects of this program. So a P3 is a public-private partnership. And what you'll hear often in the media is emphasis on the word private, but it's public and private partnership. So for instance, should the Airport Authority Board go forward with a P3, the asset, the airport, will be maintained under public control, but it will bring in private investment. What we're saying, folks to come in and invest in the dirt.
Okay.
So to build out the airport in terms of its needs, but also the adjacent area around the airport, where you could see things like light manufacturing or car rental, things like that, real estate development. So that's really important to the process. So that's a P3 in a nutshell.
Okay. And how has Hawthorne been involved in P3 work before? Is this a new venture for them?
Yes, we have done some P3 work before. P3s not only apply for airports, but they also apply to other large public projects, such as ports and things like that. We've been involved with some work around O'Hare Airport, and our founder, Gene Reineke, has also done some work with former Transportation Secretary Norm Mineta in Washington, D.C. to help potential clients look at P3 structures. I think an important thing for folks to know about P3s is that P3s are unique to each airport. That's one of the things I think we've learned in the process of exploring this. So for instance, very large airports in Atlanta have a P3 model. Also airports in Orlando have a P3 model. So this is really unique for us here at Gary, that we can develop a model that works for us in the city of Gary and works for the region overall.
Okay, what's the difference? Explain the difference to us between a P3 and privatization.
Exactly. So privatization, we hear a lot about in the news. There's been a lot of talk about, folks may hear about Midway Airport and it being privatized. And that's really where you're in essence, selling the airport for a price that goes directly into the coffers, if you will.
Something like the toll road purchase.
Exactly, something like the toll road purchase. Again, the emphasis is on public-private partnership. So what the airport authority is looking at is how do you bring in private capital, create long-term job opportunities, but keep the asset, the airport, under public control. So for instance, the model that the airport is looking at, the airport board would continue to function. The airport would continue to be owned as a public asset, but it would have private management involved. And that's really key, because where you have private management, you have private dollars.
Okay.
and they can come in and invest in the airport with an expected return. But I think the key there is public-private partnership, very important thing. In fact, it's one of our key messages that we emphasize continually when we're talking about this project with various groups.
Well, the reason I brought you that question, Tim, was because the public-private process is totally different from privatization, and some would actually make the point that we're in the process of giving the airport away, and that's or selling the airport, and neither one of those are true. So since you've been at the Gary Chicago Airport, I know you met many interesting people. So tell us about some of those people and some of those people that you work with now.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love this project. I like it for many reasons. I love the idea of redevelopment, and you can see the vision I think that the board has and that the mayor has for the airport and for the surrounding area. And that trickles down to folks. You can see the passion. Folks that work at the airport and work around the airport have a passion for it. And they care deeply about it. And that's infectious. I feel that when I work at the airport. I also understand and see what they know that it can continue to be, that it can grow even bigger and better, not only for Gary but for the region. I think that's really vital. That's one of the reasons why I just love this project so much.
Well, you know, with airports, when you think about airports as a whole, airports are never just affect just one city. It may sit in one city, but it really affects the whole region around the city, and in some cases even the entire state. When you look at O'Hare and Midway, those airports have really not just blessed Chicago, but it's actually been a blessing to the whole state of Illinois.
Absolutely, Pastor. I think you hit on a good point there. The Gary Chicago International Airport is part of the larger regional space of Indiana, Illinois, you could even argue Wisconsin.
Yes.
There's what's on the ground, but there's the airspace above.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And that's where the airport sits. It's in that airspace. You can even argue going out to Michigan. Okay? So within that, not only for the airplanes and the airspace, but what's on the ground? Trains, trucks, maritime with the port. And this is the asset, really, that the airport has well beyond the boundaries of the actual runway.
Yes.
You know, and frankly, proximity of the city of Gary with downtown Chicago and the larger Chicago metropolitan region. I mean, you hate to sound too trite and saying, but the airport is really poised to take off.
Yes, and as here recently has been news articles on the Hawthorne project. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm one myself. I always state that they have a cornfield, we have an airport.
That's absolutely right.
And I see others are picking up on that now, so I'm starting to say now that they have a dream, we have an existing airport. Because what they have is a dream. We're in the process, and I mentioned to one of the reporters that we're 100 years ahead of them because if things continue to go like they are now and we're working all together to get this thing done, we'll be up and fully running even before they lay the first slab of cement. So how do you feel about that? When the governor in Illinois signed an agreement to go out, and I think they put up $41 million and possibly another $71 million coming up for the purchase of land. How do you feel that's going to affect us, or do you think it's going to affect us in any way?
I don't think it's going to affect the airport. And in fact, in the process, when the committee's been out talking with folks that are thinking about the airport, they don't see that either. There's a couple of reasons for that. As you pointed out, the Gary Airport currently has a functioning airport and a runway that's being expanded.
Right.
And when you look at Hawthorne, there's nothing there. But if you even look at it in a different sense, you look at the New York metropolitan area, and you think of the airports there, JFK, LaGuardia, Newark. You also have an airport in White Plains, New York. And there are other airports around that area.
Yeah.
You could argue that New York is supported by 7 airports.
Yes, yes.
Certainly with the Chicago metropolitan region continuing to grow in the 21st century, Whether or not Peatone ever gets something going, I don't think will have any effect on what's happening with Gary.
Were there any big surprises for you when you first stepped on the ground at the Gary Chicago Airport? And if there were, tell us what some of those are. What things were you surprised about, and what things do you see far as the current process, and how long do you really believe it's going to take for this thing to be developed?
Sure. You know, coming to it a little bit of an outsider in terms of knowing at that time exactly where the project stood in terms of the runway expansion and what was happening. When I set foot out on the construction area and the runway, what struck me all of a sudden was that I didn't appreciate the size of that runway to begin with. How large it is. And when you think about what's happening at Midway Airport and O'Hare Airport, and knowing the size of that runway there. So I was immediately drawn to that. I actually grew up near Midway Airport. So looking around and looking at the availability of the land that Gary has around it, and the potential for development, that was an exciting thing to see. So that's what struck me, I think, right away.
Okay, Tim, as we go over this, the fact of people getting involved, of community groups seeking you for engagements, maybe come out and speak to them about what is your contact about the airport, what are your contact numbers, and what is your email address?
Yeah, sure. My contact number, anyone can reach me at 773-418-3032. That's my contact number.
Give it again. Give it again.
773-418-3032.
Okay.
And I think for anyone having a particular follow-up, if they want to contact the airport via email, they can get that contact information off of our website. And again, as well as all the documents that we've been working on the P3 effort are there on the website, as well as information about the expansion of the runway project. You know, one of the things I wanted to touch on, Pastor, as well, with the P3 committee that you're a leader on, was the emphasis really on what the expectation is for the committee and for the airport going forward. And that's long-term job creation. Because when you get good capital investment and private investment, that brings jobs along with it. And I know that's paramount in the minds of the committee and of the airport board.
Okay, when we talk about the committee too, I want you to share with the viewing audience once again. We have quite a few outstanding individuals, outstanding businessmen, and I think sometimes people believe that everybody that's working out there is working, receiving some kind of check. But what I found that was so unusual about this P3 committee, they're moving forward without being on payroll.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. As you indicated, there's just an outstanding P3 committee, some who are representatives from the airport board and some who are not. So the chair of our committee is Carrie Heitman, Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Counsel at NiSource. Also Harley Snyder from the Regional Development Authority is part of that committee, and as well as Attorney Collins, who is also on the board. And I'm probably forgetting one or two at the moment, Pastor, but it's a good group, and it's a dedicated group. And there are folks who came to the committee with some knowledge of what's been happening at the board already, and deep knowledge because you're on the board, and some were really fresh to it and really took a sort of a new look at it. And then in addition to the committee itself, the committee has engaged the services of other groups to help them sort of work through the process. Hawthorne Strategies, the communications firm that I'm in, is one of those groups, as well as AC Advisory for financial consulting. They're based out of Chicago as well, phenomenal group, as well as a law firm to come in and make sure that we're thinking about the right things from a legal perspective. All of those firms really are operating at an at-risk basis.
Right.
So you know, we're not being compensated by the committee, and that's important. We're really there because we believe in the project, and if something does work out, compensation will be handled differently later by an outside entity, not the airport, by an investment group. So that's really key. I think everybody came to it willing to risk whether or not a P3 actually is adopted by the board going forward.
Well, our current chairman is Kerry Heisman, like you said, outstanding individual, but I think we lost something when we lost Dave Banowski. I thought he was an outstanding individual, and he's a banker, and he brought so much knowledge and leadership to the P3 committee, and even though we're celebrating the fact that we still have outstanding individuals, we also miss his presence.
Yeah, he was a fantastic leader for the committee, also a member of the Airport Authority Board, who recently had to step down for those positions for some personal reasons.
Right.
But a great leader of it right off the bat. Fantastic.
Okay, tell us something else about some of the people you met that you hadn't met before, and how have you formed some good relationships since you've been at the Gary-Chicago Airport?
Absolutely. I joke often that sort of my closest partner there is James Ward, who is head of marketing and communications. And James and I just, we hit it off immediately.
Okay.
And he's got a great expertise and a wonderful network within the community. So he benefits our team greatly, and that's where we can supplement each other really nicely in terms of our expertise at Hawthorne and James' expertise at the airport and in the community. Also, I would say the interim director, Steve Landry, is fantastic. His knowledge, aviation, and his deep knowledge of where the airport's been in the past and where it's going in this runway project, absolutely a great person to work with. And frankly, the board's been terrific. This is no small feat, setting up a P3 committee to look at this. It's an aggressive thing to do, and I think the Airport Authority Board deserves credit for taking this on, being willing to look at it, and to work with not only current board members but outside leaders in the community to get this P3 process moving.
How about the association with some of the elected officials? I know you didn't know any of them before you began to work at the Gary-Chicago International Airport on this project.
Sure.
What have you found out about some of our elected officials in this city, and even from surrounding communities? How would you picture their feelings about the airport itself and the build out? Yeah.
What I've observed, Pastor, is, again, I'll just use the word passion. The leaders within Gary, starting with Mayor Freeman Wilson and folks throughout the region, whether or not it's folks that we've worked with at Ivy Tech, folks that we've worked with from the Northwest Forum and the Crossroads Chamber, there's a passion for Gary, and there's a passion for Northwest Indiana. I think everyone feels and understands that in order to move the entire region forward, Gary is at the center of that. And when you look at Gary and what are those things that can really help jump it forward, it's the airport. Those are the key things. So I think there's a very keen knowledge that the airport is moving forward. There's going to be some bumps and things along the way getting there. That's expected. But I think when you look at it from the airport out to the city of Gary, out to the region, there's just a passion for that. And I think what I see is everybody pulling together to make it happen. I also want to underscore the leadership, too, of not only the mayor, but the folks at the RDA. They've been fantastic to work with, and they continue to have a passion for the airport and the city of Gary as well.
Okay, as we close out, I've been given a signal it's time to wrap it up. What would you think would be the 3 most important things that should happen in order for this process to flourish?
Sure, exactly. I'd say for some folks that are skeptical about the project and it going forward, I guess I would say ask people to hold that thought and let our actions prove itself out. I think that'll be really key. Secondly, I'd say remember that it's a public-private partnership. That the airport will stay within public control, but will bring in private dollars. And that we're doing that to help move Gary forward, and that means jobs. So I think those are the 3 things that people can take away from that. And again, if they're curious and want to learn more, there's lots of information on our website. but they can go ahead and send that email, make that phone call, get in touch with us at the airport, and we'll be happy to work with them individually or any community groups that we can come out and talk with about the airport.
We want to thank you once again for taking time out of your busy schedule, and we pray God's blessings upon you, and that the Lord will give us the power to develop the diamond in the rough, because the Gary Chicago International Airport is truly a diamond in the rough. Once again, you've been watching Taking Off with the Gary Chicago Airport Show. I've been your special host, Pastor Marion Johnson. Our very special guest has been Mr. Tim Touhy, and we thank you once again for coming. View in again and pray for the Gary Chicago Airport.